Hello again, people on the internet. I'm Hiro, and today I'm bringing you a new guide on multiclassing in Blue Protocol Star Resonance. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of multiclassing, I first want to explain for the people who are not yet familiar with the game and its systems how it actually works in Blue Protocol Star Resonance. Now, as it currently stands, we have 8 classes in Blue Protocol, and each of these classes has 2 different specs, so basically subclasses. And I can show you them real quick. These are all the classes. This is not the correct translation as I'm currently on the Chinese server. But yeah, here you can see this will be the same on global. You get like a short introduction to the class and some tips on how to play. And here you can go between the different specs. As you can see, every class has 2 specs. And for the people wondering, well, how do I change between classes? Well, this is very easy, because this is the same window as I just showed you. You basically go to the character window, and here you will find your current class, and you just click on it, and if you have unlocked the class, you can just click on it, and then down here in the bottom right, you can just switch the class, and then you can switch to it, and it will even like ask you to swap the weapon, because the weapons are class specific. You can't use them on any other class than the one your weapon is made for. Now, as you can see, I have just swapped classes. Now I am a Wind Knight, and it will not change anything about your character looks, but the weapon will change. Unfortunately, I don't have the weapon right now. I just have the Sheet Knight weapon right now in my inventory. But yeah, if you change classes, your weapon changes and it will display a different weapon, of course. Now, next up is the subclass, or specs, as they call them here. And these are found by going to your talent tree. And after filling out the base talent tree, which requires 30 points, you can then choose your subclass or spec. And before you've invested anything like skill books or some other time-gated material into your class, you can just feel free to just try out before you actually decide for which spec you want to go for, because resetting these is just free. You will not have to pay anything. You can reset as many times as you want, and yeah, just try out. So, and this base tree you can also just auto-fill out, because you will need to select all the nodes. You cannot choose which ones you want or not. You have to select all of them. And then after filling out 30 points, you can see here I can choose between the specializations. And I can just choose something. I can put a few points here and there. And now, I don't really like this. I've played around with it a bit. You can just go here. And resetting talents is free. And bam, we're back at 70 out of 70. I haven't lost anything. I can just let this fill out again. And I can try a different spec. And I highly suggest you make use of that, especially in the early game, when you haven't really decided on what you want to main, because maining will be important for this game. Now you're asking yourself, why do I have to main something when I can just swap between classes all the time? Well, you can, but the drawback is everything in the game is time-gated. So again, you can't just farm up every class at the same time and be on the same level on all the classes. I mean, technically you can, but then all your classes are going to be bad and not geared at all. So you basically have to focus on something in order to get along with the content and basically not be in the starter zones or starter dungeons forever, because you're not progressing your gear score. Because, well, you need a lot of gear score for the later content. So spreading yourself too thin by going for too many different classes is going to be a problem, especially if you're going free to play. With whaling, you can solve a lot of these issues, but there may still be some problems involved even if you're whaling. Not too big of a problem maybe, depending on how much you're whaling, but there can be some problems there. Now, another thing I want to mention real quick is how do you actually get new classes? Well, for once, you get one free extra class from a quest, and this is a very basic quest. It is unlocked shortly after you're basically starting the game, I believe. And you just have to go to the main central area in the city, and you will find the NPC over here. This is the NPC, and there will be a quest here where you can exchange one of these class unlock tokens, which I will show you in a second, for a new class basically. And then you just have to go, you have to kill like 20 mobs, and then the class is unlocked. Boom, you're done. Now the item we're looking for, and the item you will get one free of, is here, down here in the colorful shop, and it is this item over here. The translation says the brilliance of the brave, but it's a very unique looking item. You will be able to find it, and in the CBT this was exactly the same price. It cost 680 bound rose gems, so this is not locked behind a paywall or anything. You can earn these just by playing the game. So over time you can just accumulate them, and if you want to, you can unlock all of the classes on one character. Now I have created a Google Sheet for you to really give you a good overview, but before we go over that, I want to first list some limitations for multiclassing. And the first limitation that I think for sure you're going to run in, especially if you don't plan well, are the imagines. And this is because different classes, and especially different archetypes like tank, healer and DPS, want very different imagines as their best in slot. So you really have to do some good planning, because the imagines, if you're not whaling, they're not as easy to get, and it's gonna take a long time for you to build up multiple imagines. So if you want to be useful on more than one class, you really have to plan well for the imagines. Now the next thing are the skill books, and this is because the skill books are very limited, as in they are very time gated, and buying extra you will pretty much just have to go to the auction house, which is quite expensive for free to play. So depending on which class or classes you're choosing, some classes don't require you to level all the skills up in the advancement, and it may be beneficial to just leave a lot of skills at 3, but then again you're missing out on some gear score, and if you're spreading them on 2 or more classes, well, you're just spreading yourself thin, lowering the gear score of your main class in order to be somewhat decent on your other class. Of course, depending on the classes, this might be okay, but yeah, this is also just your personal preference. Of course, there's no right or wrong, and I wouldn't hold it against anyone to want to play more than one class. I think it's actually kind of exciting with the class system, so if you really like that, just go ahead, don't worry too much about it. Unless you're playing DPS and you're not leveling at least one skill to level 6, because at least one of your skills is guaranteed to be your main damage skill. You want at least one of them at 6, please. But yeah, besides that, it's up to you. Now the next thing I want to mention are the modules. They are not as big of an issue, but they can be an issue, especially if you're min-maxing. And this is because, well, they are the legendary modules. And the legendary modules have one thing not in common with the other modules. Well, they can roll special affixes that are only present on these modules. And depending on what class you're playing, especially on the DPS, but also a little bit on the other classes, the other archetypes, well, the legendary affixes are pretty good, and having a good set of modules can really min-max your character for the extra bit of damage on top, if you're really about that. But I would say like modules are probably the smallest issue in multiclassing, because you get a lot of them for free, and the legendary modules are also not rare by any means. The rare thing are the legendary affixes that can only roll on them, and they can make a difference, but yeah, depending on the class, it might not be that big of a deal. You maybe just want some general buffs and not want to go for anything hyper specific, and it will be just fine. Now the next thing I want to talk about are the gems, and the gems will become an issue for you because the gems are hyper specific, and currently on CN they are also a pretty big bound Luno sink if you are a min-maxer. And this is because when you are embedding a gem on CN, you get the option to roll that embedding, and by rolling that embedding you can obtain a higher tier gem for your embedding, and I will show you that real quick. Now for the embedding, we just want to go down here to the regular equipment NPC, and we will choose the embedding option, and let me choose one gear that I want to embed. Oh, let's choose this one. Now, as you can see, this was not in the CBT for all of the CBT folks out there. Here you can choose the embedding option, and the normal one is just regular 5k. then here you can pay 30k to have a 20% chance to get a level 6 gem. And here you can pay 150k to have a 5% chance at a level 7 gem and a 30% chance at a level 6 gem. So this will be a very, very big Luno thing if you want to go for tier 7 gems on all of your gear. Now, of course, this isn't really necessary. The amount that you get is kind of negligible, but if you're a min-maxer, especially in the DPS class, then yeah, you probably want to go for some higher tier gems, and this will make it much more difficult to play other classes. And also, at the equipment NPC, we have the issue of reforging. Now, if you are a class that shares the same main stat, then of course it's not that big of a deal, because you can get the shared gear. As you can see here, I have some raid gear equipment, and here you can basically choose, or the game will choose it for you. It just lists all the options, how the gear will adapt. And if you change class, the gear will change to the preferred stats of your subclass. So this raid gear can be very, very beneficial, but only if you're going for a class that has the same main stat, because the main stat will actually not change, only the substats will change. Like I can show you right here. I will, for example, choose the Ice Spear, which has crit and luck, but of course wants intelligence. And without their main stats, the classes are very, 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 very much worse. So every single class in this game needs their main stat, no questions asked. So I'm going to showcase that really quick. We have Haste and Mastery here on this equipment piece. And if I now just go into the talent tree and reset my talent, and then I'm going for the other spec, which I believe has critical and luck, then we will get critical and luck. Now you're like, whoa, gear morphing to your stats? We didn't have that in the CBT. What's the issue? The issue becomes then, of course, when you want to play classes that don't share the same main stat. And this is where, well, you will have to make another set of gears, which, of course, will cost you a lot of reforge stones to reforge all the gear. I can't actually show you right here, but you need a lot of reforge stones, especially for level 80 and higher gear. And, well, this can just be a time gate in the beginning, but we'll have to see how we are keeping up on the equipment treadmill. It can just be an issue that you can't really get it done in time. And also, well, you'll have to have 2 sets of gear, 2 sets of gems, so it just multiplies, and that will be quite difficult to upkeep unless you're whaling. Alright, and that was it with the limitations, but it should tell you a little bit how difficult it actually is to multiclass in Blue Protocol if you want to have a main character at the highest level. Now with that out of the way, let's finally jump into the Google Sheet and have a look at which classes might work together and which classes you should definitely not mix. Jumping into the Google Sheet, it might look a bit confusing at first, but basically I've sorted the classes by the main attribute, and here I've put all the substats and also listed the main stat for each spec and what kind of investment I think is required to play the class at a decent level. And here is my explanation of all the colors. So I've kind of rated how important each stat is for the specific subclass. Now, before we start talking about some of these, I just want to quickly mention for especially the CN folks out here, I know that currently the stats are really getting high, so you want to actually spread out some of your stats. This is quite highly technical stuff, so I really don't want to confuse anyone, but basically here you can also see some stats or some specs, they will have 4 viable stats. But yeah, this is like really up to you. Once the endgame is out, you will figure it out by then. But yeah, for now, you'll have to accept this. And of course, this is my opinion from testing a bunch of stuff, but also researching a bunch of stuff. I have not played every single spec in the endgame especially. So if you notice anything that is like really wrong, of course, please let me know in the comments. Now, what we want to be paying attention to here is, first of all, of course, the main stat. These are going to be the easiest sort of pairings, because as you've seen before, the substats will adjust. So once you've gotten one set of raid gear, yes, the gems, you will have to kind of figure it out. But for example, if you're playing a Wind Knight as a DPS, and then you want to do some tanking on the side, I would, for example, rather be stronger on the DPS and be like a little bit weaker on the tank, because, well, tanks don't do that much damage, and regardless of having gems or not, they will soak the damage, and it's better, in my opinion, to boost your Wind Knight to maximize the DPS there. So for gems, for example, I would rather go with the Wind Knight gems here. And this sort of pairing is also my highest recommendation for anyone who wants like a second class that is really, really easy going, where they can just go in, have a little bit of fun without having to invest really a lot. This is very, very good for both the Wind Knight and the Ice Mage, because they're both strong classes, good DPSs. You can really invest on them. I think they are both like mid to high investment sort of angle. It kind of depends on your imagines, but that aside, you're going from like a DPS that you can really build out, have a lot of damage, be very, very useful, to a tank on the same stat or a healer on the same stat, which is really easy once you acquire raid gear to swap to, and they all pretty much have pretty low investment required. And yes, of course, the imagines you're probably going to miss, but to just have some fun, go to some dungeons, do some master dungeons or whatever, it is really quite enough, I think. So just to have a breath of fresh air with the classes, these are my highest recommendations of Wind Knight to tank or Ice Mage to heal. Of course, this also works the other way around, but then you're going to have the issue that your Wind Knight or your Ice Mage, you will not have the weapon for it, and you're missing some damage gems, you're probably missing some of their more important imagines, so this will really cut your damage by quite a bit, and then yeah, you're still popping and it can be quite fun. Don't be discouraged to doing that, but it will be more and more difficult the higher we go in the gear score, the more difficult the content becomes. But hey, we'll have to see, and you can of course decide for yourself. It's a free world out here. But you will be useful nonetheless, and unless it's like a really difficult raid, like the Nightmare Dragon raid, I don't think it's gonna be that much of an issue. Now, after hearing all of this and seeing all of this, do you think it's viable to multi-class? And depending on who you are, you might say yes, and you might say absolutely not. And it comes down to a few things. Either how much you're willing to whale, how much you're willing to spend extra, or on the other hand, how much are you willing to be a bit behind other players, especially on your second class. But overall, I think it's really not that bad, because if you've pushed your main character quite a lot, or a decent amount at least, and you're swapping especially inside a main start bracket, you're not going to be that far behind your other class, especially in gear score. And that will be important, of course, for matchmaking, entering into any content, because that's why you want to actually multi-class. You want to play a class, a different class in the same content, to, at least for me, get like some other input, and play a kind of even a different game in the same game, if you know what I mean. Because at some point, I think right now, as it currently stands, I think some classes, especially for me at least, could get a little bit boring. So I'm definitely gonna plan ahead, so I don't get bored of my one class, and definitely just have a backup to just play and enjoy. And I know there are a lot of fun classes out there. I've been having fun with a lot of these. I've tried a lot of these already, so I don't think there's like really any best pick. It really depends a bit on your playstyle and what you really like about the game. Okay, and here we are at the end of the guide. I really hope you enjoyed this informative guide. I know it may be a bit longer, but I really tried to cram a lot of info in here, because I have seen a lot of people talk about this topic, and I really wanted to clear some things up that may have also not been that apparent in the CBT for anyone that played it, and let you already plan ahead a bit of the launch, so that we can all get onto the server and know a bit what we're going to do, what we maybe want to try, which combination, and yeah, just have a little bit of that fun before the actual game begins. I'm already very excited, and I haven't decided my main class yet, or which combination I'm going to go for, so after I'm done with this video, I'm actually going to take a closer look and maybe do some thinking, do some testing, and I'll actually decide when the launch comes. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, thank you for watching. Hiro out.